Hello. Hola. How are you
Hi.
today? Good to see you. Welcome to the series, our conversations. There's a kind of thing I want to talk about today, a tiny little thing, and
Mhm.
it's both about improvisation, it's also about pedagogy, it's about quite a few things. And its title is quite deliberate. I've prepared a little what I called a two-dimensional model of developing content in improvisation.
Mm.
And I call it a two-dimensional model because I want to reveal it's an inadequate description of something. It's only a two-dimensional model. It's a simplification to help people to understand what they're doing, but it's not the thing itself. The thing itself is multidimensional because the thing itself, improvising, is essentially a human activity, and that
Mm.
means automatically it is multidimensional, it is subtle, it is nuanced, it is unconscious, it's beyond our control. So this is a very common pedagogical trick, which is when you're trying to teach something which is complicated or sophisticated, what teachers do is they reduce it into something, a simpler form of itself. And here we meet good teachers and bad teachers, because the good teachers know that what they're teaching is a simplification, and the bad teachers believe what they're teaching is the truth. So you end up with a two-dimensional model and you go, well, that's the truth. This is not the truth. This is just an approximation to help us to understand something which is quite, it's not hard to understand, but it's complex because it's to do with being human, which is a complex business, as we all
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
Good. I think I've explained that quite well.
Really? I'm
Yeah,
impressed.
yeah.
I'm stressed now.
Thank you. Oh, good, good. It's good to keep you a little bit on edge. You Europeans, you just think you know everything. So this is great. So now I will confuse you with my model. I went to a lot of trouble to organize this. We have the slow crossfade to the model, a two-dimensional model of how content develops in improvisation. Okay, so it's predicated on this kind of two perpendicular axes. This is very common in mathematics. It doesn't exist. It's not real. It's an absolute abstraction developed by a human mind to understand something which is hard to comprehend. But if we were to think there are two perpendicular axes, there would be this one I would call a vertical dimension. I call it that for my own purposes. And I call that the dimension of, it's called sticking with. It's staying with something and developing it. It's that, the sticking with dimension. This applies to both movement and it applies to language, any kind of improvising you want to do. And the other dimension, the horizontal one, that's called moving on. That's letting go and changing to something else, letting go and changing. So you just keep moving on, moving on. And it's great to imagine that those two dimensions exist, even though they don't. It's very handy. The benefit of this sticking with thing, if you stick with something, then one of the things that happens in the human brain is that we start to develop meaning. We start to understand. We're working with something. We can name it. We could name its dimensions. There's all sorts of things we can do. So it's about developing meaning, and that's its positive aspect for that. The moving on dimension, its positive aspect is that you feel free because you don't have to think of or plan anything. Just go to the next thing, go to the next thing, go to the next thing. So that's great so far. But also within each dimension, it has its negative aspect. So in the vertical dimension, the sticking with one, if you stick with something too long, then actually you feel stuck. You know, it's when the
Hmm.
meaning gets so big and then you're trying to deal with it, but actually you're just stuck in it now. You've just dug a lovely big hole for yourself. I think that must be why I've chosen it as the vertical dimension. And then you feel stuck. You know,
Hmm.
it's that the meaning has become the dominant thing, and then how do you deal with that improvisationally? So that's its negative aspect. And the negative aspect of the horizontal dimension, this moving on one, is that you keep doing it, and eventually, inevitably, your brain says, what does this mean? You know, you've got this kind of textural field, and you've got this dynamic field, and you can play there for a while, but sooner or later you go, oh, it's just nothing. You know, it's a
Hmm.
kind of nihilism kind of coming on of those two things. So they both have their positive aspect and they both have their negative aspect. Of course, within the two-dimensional model, The cure for the negative aspect of one is the positive aspect of the other one. So training ourselves to change easily and quickly between sticking with things or from moving on, it means that we could actually never have a problem. Because if I feel like I'm stuck with, I have no meaning, then I stick with something and I create a meaning. And if I feel like I'm stuck with something, I let go of it and I do something different. So I keep solving my problems with this, combining these positive and negative dimensions there. I just want to remind you these dimensions are not real. It's not the truth. It's just a way to understand it that actually can help students, and it certainly helped me, to have enough experience with improvising to actually understand it experientially. In the end, that's what we're all doing, is we're trying to understand this as an experience, and the intellectual is there to help us do that. But we want to just be able to put ourselves in the situation where we can do it. So that's the kind of topic I've done today. This is quite an old model for me. I used to teach this a lot, maybe 15, 20 years ago. This sticking with thing, it has many, many forms. A kind of basic one is repetition, a transformational repetition, not repetition. So it's not repeating something as you would choreographically to make it exactly the same each time, but you might repeat something to see how it changes. But you stay with the something essential, and in the repetition, you find something in it that changes its meaning. So you're repeating, but in a transformational kind of way. There's a very special, once you start to improvise a bit, there's a very special kind of sticking with, which I call bringing back, which is you go back to something you've already done. So you're sticking with something that happened earlier, and you go back to it in some way. Is that a question I see there?
The microphone is.
On my shirt.
Yeah. It's better.
Never mind.
Yeah, that's
Is that better now?
Yes, it's better. Much
I
better.
I will not gesticulate with such fury. I promise. I will reduce my gesticulations to the point where it does not upset the microphone. I can do this. I have skills. I thank you very much. So there's this bringing back, which means that you're not sticking with one thing. You can start something and then go back to it later. I think this is a very interesting thing. Often, really, for me, I find it most interesting when it's not so much I remember and decide to go back, but I find it has come back. I'm kind of noticing it return rather than consciously choosing it. So it's really trying to endorse improvisational forms where you're not being too conscious and too manipulative and too constructive, but you're really noticing how things happen, like listening for echoes rather than searching for a key to put in a lock. So I'd like to do a little demonstration of a kind of teaching thing, if you're okay for that. Hola?
Yes.
Good.
Andrew,
so
me?
Yes, you. Because the others are lazy. They don't want to do it. They can't hear me on the microphone anyway. So it has to be your lucky day today. Great. And so I maybe we might do a couple, but they won't be very long, 2 or 3 minutes. And I want you to start working in with movement. Sorry, I'm wobbling the camera now just to make it even less technically proficient. I want you to work with movement.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can kind of start in the way where what you are doing is you make one movement, and then you make another movement, and then you make another movement. Okay, you don't try and create a phrase. You just make a movement, and then at the end of that movement, you try and find another movement, and then at the end of that one, you try and find another one. So you're not trying to find a phrase. At a certain moment, I'll say, stick with that. So whatever you've just done, or whatever you think you've just done, whatever you're right about that, I won't be saying that's not right. But when I say stick with that, take whatever you just did and just play with it a bit more. Repeat it and see where it wants to go. You're allowed to let it develop. after a very short time, I'll say move on, and then you go back to doing one movement, and then another movement, and then another movement. Okay, so in that mode, the end of one movement, it gives you the beginning of the next movement, but you're not trying to get any of your great choreographic knowledge to help you to develop things. You're just doing one and then go, now I want to do that one, now I want to do that one, now I want to do that. Okay, so we start with that, and when I say stick with, you play with it, and when I'm never giving you these instructions because I'm bored. So when I say stick with, it's not because I'm going, that's boring, do something better. I just want you to experience the
Mm-hmm.
difference in shifts between sticking with material and just always moving on without
Okay.
controlling the material.
Yeah.
Does that make sense at all?
Yes, yes. It's I'm thinking that that's like to sticking with. It's already like a lot to what I choose. I'm curious by myself now.
Yes, yes.
That
We're very curious about you
yeah.
too. So that's great. So yes, we will
Okay.
see what happens. But
Yeah.
a simple kind of non-thinking way to do it is just let yourself repeat what you just did, and see
Yeah.
where how it wants to go. That's a kind of not thinking too hard choreographically about how to do it. Just let yourself play a little bit with repetition, and transformation.
Okay.
Good. Are you going to pin yourself?
Yeah, I'm pinned myself already. Yeah. Thank you
Okay. Can
for
you still
thank
hear
you for
me?
reminding.
That's okay. That's what I'm here for. Old men have their uses, not many, but that's one of them.
Okay.
Okay. You can start now. Stick with that. Move on. 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 And stop there. Very good. Very, 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 very good. Of course. Uh, how was that for you?
Yeah, it was I like to have someone um who interrupt somehow
Yes.
and give me
Yes.
this moment which I maybe normally don't stop. So this is
Yeah.
really, really,
Exactly. Yes. And I'm available to follow you through for
yeah,
the rest of your life
yeah.
and to do this. It is quite expensive, but I'm available. And somebody will have to send my wife a telegram, but I'm sure we could organize something. So, yeah, that's for everyone watching. If you need someone like this in your life, I can do it. I'm available. Absolutely. Stick with that. Move on. It works very well with policemen when they are talking to you about to arrest you for because you were at the rally, and you just stick with, move on, move on, move on. They can't catch you at all. It's very good. Good,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
good.
and also the moment the moment there was the negotiation in my head,
Yep.
what in which part to stick in the quality or in the
Yes.
shape or what kind of stickness is like in stick as a starting point in develop it or like to repeat it. Like there are like so
Yes.
much negotiations in my head.
Yes. There are. Yep. And
It was
that's great.
intense.
You've got fantastic skills. So you know you need to bring all that skill to it. Whatever skills you bring to it, you will have a bigger or smaller palette of ways of doing that. But whatever it is, do that. The great thing about having someone on the outside, it cuts across your habits of where you
Mhm.
would choose to do that. So what would, as improvisers, trying to, in the, as a teacher of this, trying to get people to do is to do it without, like for some people, they're just starting to enjoy something and I say, stop doing that, do something else. And they go, oh, I'm just starting to enjoy it, And I go, yep, get used to that, because that you have to surprise yourself in improvising. So therefore,
Mm.
you do have to be able to interrupt yourself. And the other one, sometimes they are sticking with something and you haven't told them to go back to moving on. They go, oh, it gets so boring. And you go, yeah, 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 that's one of the things too. You've got to give up some of these values of yourself. Am I bored, for instance? Or, oh, this is just getting interesting and now I'm stopping. So that this skill of being able to change from one to the other is extremely fluid and easy to achieve for you, that you're not overcoming your nostalgia for what you were doing before, that you're actually just able to change almost for no reason. And when you have that as a skill, then you are free to change whenever you want. You will change in unusual places or normal places. It doesn't matter in the long run, but it's just good to have this very well practiced skill. What I'd like you to do, one little thing, a few times, um, you use repetitions even when you were moving on. Okay, so it's like even though you're going, I'll just repeat this like that. If you are doing a repetition, tell yourself you are sticking with something.
Mm.
Okay, if it's a repetition, even walking one step after another, just tell yourself, oh, I'm sticking with. That's sticking with when I play with repetition.
Mm.
Moving on, I don't repeat the theory. Again, it's a completely made up model, so this is not true. But the theory behind it is that in moving on, you would never repeat because
Yes.
each thing is just a response to what you just did. So I'm in this place and I'm only here once, and the next thing is unique to this place, and then I'd find the next thing. So there's actually no repetition in the world of moving on. So any repetition is a sticking with. It's because you've got such great training and skills that you use that, but it's always a sticking with.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like you to do now is do another little short solo. We just have time,
Mm-hmm.
just for say 1 minute, and just
Mm-hmm.
notice for yourself how sticking with and moving on comes to help you. Just notice for yourself when you do sticking with and when you do moving on. You don't have to be doing it all the time. Just see how it comes to help you as you do this. And time. bring that to an end. How'd you go?
Oh, it was like refreshing.
Great.
Yeah, there's like I like this that I maybe think less now, but
Yes, yes,
it's nice to be uh, mm, conscious. I mean that actualize. I don't know that actualization that okay, like naming in it. I'm sticking
yes,
or I'm what I'm doing.
yes.
Okay, now
Moving on.
okay,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah,
There's like this moments. Yeah, it was like really
yeah.
agency. It's coming.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's a great thing to play with because you will meet all your patterns.
Yeah,
Sooner or later you'll find all your habits and all your patterns, and that none of those are bad things, but you will discover what they are in case you
yeah,
don't know what they are,
yeah.
and it brings them back into consciousness. You will notice that certain habits are occurring to you, and it's great for that too, to remind you what your habits are, and they are great friends, but also like all good friends, you don't have to be with them all day
All the
every day,
time.
so you
Yeah,
can have, yeah. We should finish there, otherwise this will be too long.
yeah.
We have to give it a title. What will we call it
Um,
today?
something about sticking.
Yeah, I think so too. What about something to do with mud?
Mud?
Something to stuck in the mud.
Stuck in the
It's a
mud.
it's a
Okay.
it's it's
Stuck in
it's
the
it's a
mud.
very good English expression. Yeah,
Yeah,
stuck in the mud on
I
a
like
windy
it.
day. Stuck in the mud on a windy day.